Really stoked to have you here.
I'm stoked to be with you.
Yeah, I was just sharing about my experience with Zen, and you were about to mention you started at 19. You beat me by 2 years.
Yeah, I started at 19 because I had sort of I think as my father put it, I'd fucked up my life already. I'd come to America as an international student, and I got after my first semester, I got a note saying you're on probation, and I sort of ignored it because I was having too much fun. And after the second semester, they said you're disenrolled, and I was like, oh crap.
Dang.
I'm 19 years old. I'm disenrolled from university. I'm here as a student. That means I have to leave the country.
Right.
I didn't want to leave America, and so I had to do this real fast kind of discovery process of how does a human being get a grip on their life. And so I was in Southern California. It was the mid 80s. It was all these wonderful offerings, and it was a meditation and the Zen tradition, and then living in a spiritual community for what ended up being 13 years. That
Really?
Yeah, it was very disciplined.
Where was that
like,
in San Diego? What was that all about?
we were on the border of Mexico, down deep in Chula Vista.
Okay.
We had a multi-acre property and a bunch of homes. There were 50 people living there, and
Amazing.
we lived with our teacher. And up every morning at 5:30, meditate, do the whatever your chores are in the community, breakfast, and people would go to school or work or whatever, and come back and meditations and practices in the evening.
Chores and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, went on for a long time.
That's incredible. Right, so when I was studying Zen, it was primarily as an adjunct to my martial arts. We do a long session on Thursday evenings, and then Mr. Nakamura encouraged us, said you're not practicing unless you're doing a daily practice. And so I got my little Zazen bench, from some mail order catalog. This is before the internet, and I started practicing every morning. But I think the most profound shifts came. So we would take these retreats to the Zen Mountain Monastery in Woodstock, and there was the head monk was named Dido, and this guy was a trip. Like, he was covered in tattoos. He was a former merchant marine who had transitioned into his monkhood, an incredibly interesting guy. And so we would spend 4 days with the in-residence monks twice a year. Did that for a number of years, and it was a profound experience. I love that. Just like you said, where everything is a practice, right? It's not just sitting practice, but eating is a practice, and doing the dishes is a practice, and gardening is a practice, and play, and jumping in the river down the street was a practice. That really helped me understand what practice is, or shugyo, right? This idea that life ultimately is a practice, and ultimately all Zen is meant to be off the bench and in relationship and in an everyday experience.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Those retreats are called sesshins, right? That means an
Sesshins,
intensive in Japanese.
That's right.
Sesshins, and the sesshins are however many days long, right? And it's exactly that. It's an intensive where I put on meditation retreats twice a year in San Diego, and I'm not claiming them to be a Zen retreat, but that's what I'm trained in, right? So it's a Zen tradition.
I'd love to come on those, by the way. That'd be great.
Oh, that'd be awesome. So I talk about it as having monk mode, right? The monk mode, like the sesshin, is where you go into and you become a renunciate. So what does a renunciate do? The renunciate is giving up the ordinary,
right? Stepping up
in order to have something different,
right?
And so those sesshins are. But your point is like, and to me, this is like the point of all these practices, right? Is it's one thing to sit on a cushion or on a bench and sort of attain a state. It's another to be in a boardroom or in a negotiation with a vendor or in a conversation with your child or your spouse, your husband, your wife, and be able to hold center, right? To stay in that place of consciousness, right? Because it's like all these little hooks and little pieces are tearing and pulling at our center, and to hold that is the gift that we can bring to the world and to ourselves.
Right. No, I agree with that, and I think this is missed a lot with the way meditation is taught today. It's taught either just for relaxation or health, or almost as an escape, right? And so you can have that kind of that spiritual bypass where you escape into the void and completely disengage from life, and that's like the term Advaita means not to. so escaping in the void to think, oh, I'm in this, I am one with the universe, you're missing the not two part, because you are also one with life, right? So it's important to be both and.
So when I was 30, I decided I was going to give my life completely to the spiritual practice. I was going to leave the world. I was living in the community. I was working at the time at Corning as a young marketing executive. It was so easy to kick ass in corporate when I had that level of insane discipline as my regular life. Going to work was like the easy part of the day. And then, but, know, I was 30, I decided none of this anymore. I'm going to go full time into the point about your not one, two. I ended up essentially taking full oaths of, devotion and poverty. I gave away all my money. I shaved my head. I gave away all my liquidated my 401k, gave me all in. Went to the mountains of New Mexico, spent 3 months and built a 625 square foot cabin. Wow. And I then moved in there. There was a community, sister community of ours in the mountains, and so they would bring me food once a week, so I was cared for. And I went into what ended up being a year-long silent session, a silent retreat for a year. Right. And what ended that year was exactly what you're talking about. I literally had this profound revelation that said something to the effect of, you're going the wrong way.
Right.
And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
What? That your spiritual life will come more online with wife and children and service and community.
Right.
And I remember thinking, I do not like this message. Right. I had signed off on everything. I was done. And here was the message saying no. And to your point, right? It's in, that was 20 some odd years ago, 25 years ago that I came back. And these past 25 years have been 25 years of integration, right? How do I live with my wife, with my now 22 and 20-year-old daughters, with my business, with my clients? Not
right.
In the
mountains. Yogis call it the householder path, and they said it's the hardest path.
I assure you, they're right.
They're right. My wife and I have been listening to this great audio series from Sounds True by a guy named Bruce Tift, and he's a Western trained psychotherapist, married family therapist, who's also trained in Vedanta, Buddhism, from Rinpoche Chugram. He's a very famous teacher. So he was able to kind of braid the Western path of striving to improve the conditions of one's life, to clear up trauma and shadow, all of this kind of Jung style grasping, needing to get somewhere that's not here, with the Eastern model of fruitional practice of everything is already here.
As it is.
And so the practices of surrender and acceptance, and to allow the ripe to fruit and fruit come to fruition on its own accord. And it's just so awesome. So the book is called Already Free. He's got a book, but the audio is him just doing a series of lectures and stuff. It's really neat. Anyway, so what I loved about one of the things he said is that in the Western world, especially maybe, let's say America, but Western world in general, relationships, he's found that relationship is the most profound path for spiritual awakening. Because in relationship, everything comes out. And you're forced, if you want that relationship to work, then you've got to take a look at, the emotional healing and the shadows and those things that tend to be skipped over when someone just does the headspace type meditation, right? And so seeking kind of non-dual, and even the psychedelic movement is a victim of this, because you can have these profound experiences, these kind of non-dual mystical experiences, and completely bypass any of the emotional or relational work. And so then over time that doesn't work so well, and the ego kind of co-opts that as a sense of dreadful specialness, right? And so we see a lot of that especially here in California. There's a lot of people feeling very special about their spiritual, progress.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was. It's been true that even though I lived 13 years with a teacher in a community marriage, so my wife and I are now 25 years married. Our kids are 22 and
Congrats.
20. That level of, and it occurred to me after I sort of digested this message, right? Because it was like a download, you must go do this. And it occurred to me that it's the next level up from my spiritual school, from the community that I lived in, because there was still tolerance and variability, right? I could still hide, but in the way that I wanted to be married, in the way that I wanted to raise my kids, it was going to be, everything was going to be wide open.
Right.
And that was it's been a profoundly maturing as a human and spiritually evolving experience.
Right. That. So when you had that epiphany that you needed to re-engage and be in the world, did you have clarity around kind of your mission, or like what that would look like? Or did that come afterwards?
Well, the mission for me was I wanted to integrate spirituality in business.
Got it.
That was the mission. It was like, that was the mission. And then, so I had to sort of leave my secure location, as it were, right? And go into the realm. And my biggest fear at the time, I was in my early 30s, was that I would go into the belly of the beast, right?
You get corrupted again.
And that the beast would digest me, right? I would just be digested into more fodder for the beast, and,
That's awesome. Oh, man.
And so it's taken like a real continuous spiritual practice. I couldn't bring spirituality into business if I wasn't living spirituality in business. I can't hawk something that isn't, sort of oozing out of my skin as my own beingness. Right. And so, and in a way that has guaranteed my own spiritual practice.
Right.
Right. If I didn't want to get digested by the beast, and if I wanted to remain authentic in my expression, then I would have to continue to practice. Because, by the way, the expression I'm 56, right? The expression of a 56-year-old man is not the same as an expression of a 35-year-old man. Right. With all due respect to my ancestor, my previous self, I'm not him.
Your ancestor, I love that.
And so keeping it alive is kind of the trick, and that's what's cool to bring to other people, right? How do you stay in this? Authentic isn't a moment. Authentic is
it's a process. Yeah,
it's a state, and so that's the invitation.
I love what you're saying. I too am a coach at one level, right? I'm an author like you, and I'm a coach, and I run a couple businesses and a nonprofit. So we have a lot of similarities there. But the fact of being a coach, trainer, teacher, the different manifestations of kind of this expression that you're talking about, of authentically bringing yourself through your mission to others to help them in some way. The deeper I've gotten into it, the more important my own practice has become, so that I'm worthy of what I'm asking, or of what my mission is asking of me. And so for that reason, I prioritize every morning. I don't, unless something really important, I don't take any appointments before 10 a.m. And I use that time practicing with my wife and myself, and we do a variety of practices that bring us joy and peace, our meditation and our contemplation and our readings and our yoga, and then our workout together and our sauna and our cold plunge. I got to tell you, it's pretty awesome.
That sounds awesome.
I feel pretty blessed.
Yeah.
Anyways, my point is practice is everything when it comes. Ultimately, I think all executives and leaders will come to this realization that this is the piece that they're missing. Like we've pretty much mastered the yang, doing, strategy, tactics, biohacking. Everyone's trying to find the latest hack or supplement or something that's going to improve them, and they're looking like you are looking in the wrong direction. They're looking in the wrong direction. So turning the inner eyes inward, finding that inner guru and guide, and being able to sit in silence and receive that spontaneous knowingness. That's the next phase of leadership development, in my view. What do you think about that?
That's exactly where I'm at. We're on the same page 100%. I think, the point you made about your own practice, and at some point, we refer to it to practice for lack of a better word in English, but it's not your practice, it's your life.
That's right.
Right?
What
you're doing. We're calling it practice, but it's the way you're living your life. And I think one of the most sort of elemental things, for the two of us who are actually in the realm of coaching and working with people to bring about what's possible for them, it's, we can take people where we've gone, So we have to keep going places where we're inviting people to come along with us. And then if I think of my CEO clients or executive clients, in much the same way, if they're asking their people to show up in a particular way, they have to be able to be that, right? You can't manifest a culture that is distinctly different from who you are as a person when you're the chief executive.
Right.
So if you want a culture that is, inclusive, or that is innovative, or that is safe for people to experiment so that you can continue to grow and beat the odds, you have to be that person.
Right.
You can't outsource it to HR.
That's right.
It's got to be the person.
I agree with that. Let's talk about humility. I think people often mistake humility also as like a tactic or as something they have to do. And, to your point, it's actually just this essential nature, right? When one is tapping into their essential nature, it's just raw humility, right? The ego is completely set aside. And I think that can only be found through this life practice that you and I are talking about just, learning to not have to be right, to end this constant search for some perfect form or state, to end the judgment even toward yourself.
Yeah. It's a huge one.
I think humility is probably like the master key for leadership, because like everything you just described earlier about showing up as safety to create safety, showing up as abundance to create abundance. It's kind of like the still pond metaphor. It all flows from the still pond. The still pond is humility.
So I love that you go there, and you may know, it's part of my piece in my new book, right? The Leadership Breakdown. I talk about humility as one of the key pieces in there.
Good, I wanted to get into that too.
So just linguistically, there's some really interesting clues about what humility is, right? So humility comes from the root humus, right? Which is the same root that the word human comes from, which is the humus, which is that dark earth, right? You talk about humus as the dark earth. And so humility is to be grounded, to be of the earth, and to be fundamentally human.
Nice.
Fundamentally, humility, humus, human, earth, it is fundamental, and so what it means to be humble or to have humility is basically to say, I am not better than anyone else, nor worse than anyone else, right? I am eyeball to eyeball, shoulder to shoulder, level on the level with every other human being. I think, when I was younger, my teacher would talk to me about my false humility, which I think is something you're describing. My false humility is, oh, shucks, no, I didn't have anything to do with that, or, that thing, no, that didn't take anything. That's false humility.
Right.
The real capacity for humility comes from, to your point, the sense of confidence that transcends, my accomplishment. It's a confidence that comes when what I call ego-myopia. I don't know, so that's my term for the real challenge, ego-myopia, the sort of not being able to see and manage our ego. When we can correct the ego-myopia and recognize our basic ordinariness, right? Humus, earth, human, ordinary, then we can begin to really allow this special sort of manifestation of the life force that is flowing through us as this unique being at this time to come forward without a whole bunch of distortion. So we can be humble and incredibly talented and powerful and charming. And there's no limit on what you can be when you're being humble. It just fundamentally means that I am grounded in my sense of ordinariness. I'm not better than anyone or worse than anyone.
Yeah.
And if we can bring that into a room, then what the leader does is you're not just holding space, but you're shaping space. Right. You're shaping a space where other people can come into their greatness. Right. What the hell? You do that, and now you have, extraordinary performance from folks who are aware of how ordinary.
Well said.
And that's the conundrum.
I love that. Yeah, I've often looked at it like consciousness is flowing through these body minds that are conditioned, right? And all that conditioning from birth and karmic, and memories and experiences becomes a sense of identity. And of course, the basic Zen practice is to investigate that and realize that there's nothing there, right? It's porous. It's insubstantial, right, is the terminology. So then you're like, okay, if that's not me, if I am not those memories, and I am not, the basic I am practice, if I am not that, then who am I? You get into Ramana Maharshi's and the Jnana Yoga path, and it's like, oh, well, I am consciousness. But it's also not unrealistic to say, I also have this body which had these experiences in this karmic energy, but just don't place my center of gravity in that. Be playful with it. See that as the, the character in the play that is in this drama of this world that you get to create. And a big part of that creation is to clean up the miscreations when, for the bulk of your life or a big chunk of your life that you did identify as that ego mark, and you ended up dropping a shit ton of grenades and blowing stuff up. And I don't mean on the battlefield, I mean in life. You know what I mean? I had a considerable amount of cleaning up.
Yeah, all the maimed and injured people around.
I mean, it's devastating the damage we can do when you're living just purely from ego. Anyway, I went off a little tangent there, but tell me more about the leadership breakdown. That's an interesting title. And are you talking about breaking down the ego and getting through to the other side to where you can show up like we're talking about?
So it's intended as a double entendre, right? So it's the leadership breakdown. So there's all this leadership. You're watching these breakdowns, right? On a personal level, right? Somebody beset by imposter syndrome, and so they're kind of having to work extra hard and burn themselves out to prove something. That's a leadership breakdown. Or there's a conflict between two executives, the CFO and the COO are not getting along, and their teams are following suit and detaching from one another. So there's breakdown. Or at the organizational level. So that's one. The other is, you can break down so you can break through, right? And to me, at the core of that, and this is what the book and what my work and what my effort has sort of matured into over these couple of decades, right, is what I've come to call ego-myopia, the inability to see and manage the ego. And very much to the point you just made, which wasn't a tangent at all. I think it's so central to this conversation, is that when the ego-myopia is corrected, so I don't actually have any conversation, Mark, about destroying the ego, killing the ego, having no ego, because I don't know how to experience that. So I haven't experienced that. I've experienced an untold number of altered states, bliss states, one states, somatic consciousness.
Sure.
And every time I come back as Eric.
There's Eric. There's Mark. Right?
Slightly shifted, less. But so for me, the conception has become, how can we have this ego structure that becomes more what I call more porous and more spacious? Yes. Right? So the ego identity becomes more porous, right? More things can move through it. They're not quite as fixed, and more spacious. I can contain more possibilities. And when we can be in the world with this more porous and spacious sense of self, then we're in that Zen practice on a daily basis, right? Where things move through rather than become solidified. And leadership breakdown was an invitation for leaders to understand how to practically grasp some of that, right? What is the ego? What does it get in the way? And then I have these three constructs that if you integrate them, sort of awaken and integrate these three elements, that's the sort of the journey towards a healthy ego.
Yeah, I love that. The way you're describing in the Eastern traditions, like Zen, talk about this opening. It's both a heart opening and a mind opening. Ultimately, like we use in our training the term kokoro, which means heart and mind merged into your actions. So jnana, beautiful. Bhakti, and karma. And so this, where was I going? I must be in a state of no mind. Mu has taken over me.
let's just hang out in silence for the next 10 minutes.
Let's just hang out in silence. Oh, I know where I was going. Exactly. Wouldn't that be great for a podcast? Be like, let's just do a practice and just sit in silence.
People probably fall asleep. My wife is gone for the weekend, so she's been gone for a week. And so this weekend I have a meditation temple that I built in the backyard here. And so I sat from 8 to 6 on Saturday and 8 to 5 on Sunday, because I had the time and space, and it was like, this is
it's like coming home.
Yeah, this is my wife leaves for the weekend, and I go and meditate for the weekend, so she's thinking I'm a little weird.
Win-win. what I was going to say is the descriptions of like the experience on a meditative path, right? So more openness, more inclusiveness, moving beyond ego, and even into this more spacious inclusiveness of all, right? And that lines up with the Western stage model in development psychology, right? So there's a real kind of almost like where the Western model ends, the Eastern model kind of picks up, talks more about the transpersonal, whereas the Western model is talking about personal adult development, and this has even been taken, as you're aware, into leadership development by the likes of Bill Torbert and some of the other, vertical
vertical development,
theorists. Yeah, vertical development, which is one of the things that we're working with our company, Unbeatable. So, anyways, like the experience of the post-conventional stages of self-awareness, self-transcendence, and then getting into the unitive, right? So these are all Western terms that really are talking about the same thing, right? As an individual grows up through these successive stages of adult development, then they become more inclusive. They transcend the former version of themselves, like you said, the earlier version of Eric, and I'm on version probably like 4.0 myself, or maybe depending on how I want to slice it.
I'm sure it's more than that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and so then you just become the ego gets softer, like you said. I love that idea of porous. You just get less identified with it. You start, for me, I'll speak from my personal experience. I do see it as, there's a bunch of memories and experiences, but there was this essential beingness that I can identify, threaded throughout my life. I can see it in myself at 4 years old, standing in the garden of my mom's friend's house, just standing there, just like watching the butterflies. And of course, that age, like the mind is still kind of forming, but that essential nature that I can experience right now with that memory was the same as I experience right now as a 60-year-old Mark. And that's because over time I've been able to kind of like diffuse my attachment to that ego as the center of my being, and to allow the center of my being to be this life
and so
flowing consciousness through me, right? And so I love how the Western and the Eastern kind of marry up there, right, with that stage development in consciousness studies.
And we didn't practice this in advance, but your language and my language has a lot of similarity, because I described the movement, sort of along that vertical development, right? So, and a lot of people would be happy to arrive at like self-authorship, right? And for many folks, that would be a meaningful accomplishment, right? Self-authorship. I'm no longer in kind of victim mindset. I'm now self-authorship. That's only like halfway, right, along the journey. And the way I conceive of it often is sort of moving from being self-centered to being life-centered, right? Like so to your point, if there's a circle and a dot, we're switching from being focused on the dot to being focused on the circle. Moving from self-centered to life-centered, and that is when the ego is more spacious and porous. It doesn't mean you're still identifiably Mark. I'm still identifiably Eric. I'm also on version probably, I don't know, 8.0, something like that. There are various versions, and each one of these versions is stacked like babushkas right inside of me, informing, but not deciding anymore. And so the identity doesn't go away. I've long abandoned that. I mean, the idea of having no identity is like, that's not the human aspiration. But to your point, we can actually, as a human being, as a husband to my wife, as a father to my kids, as a CEO of my business, I can be completely Eric, but not only Eric. That's the beauty, and that's where I think this conscious leadership invitation is. And here's sort of the piece of context for me, right, is that the world we live in, or the experience of the world we live in, has shifted from, once it was a simple world where you could see cause and effect, then it became a complicated world where a bunch of people could solve for it. Now it's a complex world.
Now it's complex.
Right? And we're diving in and out of chaos, right? Complexity. And so in the complex world, you can't really lead or function like you did in the complicated world. It's not just cause and effect. It's agility and innovation, which we hear about all the time, not just because those are fancy consulting words, but because that's what's required to deal with complexity. And these states
Right.
of being more porous and spacious. I mean, why do so many change efforts fail? It's because of people's egos. I don't want to do this way. This is the way it's got to be. This is the way I prefer it. It's convenient for me. And the ego is fundamentally wrapped
Right.
around safety. So if we can be more porous and spacious, we can handle risk better. We can be more innovative and agile. And we can absolutely be more kind, connected, and collaborative.
Right.
That's my
Yeah,
pitch
I agree
for
with that.
doing the work,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I completely agree with that. I love the the image of the Rorschach nesting dolls. Ken Wilber uses the term transcend and include.
Yeah.
So you don't give up when you evolve or transcend or have one of those moments where suddenly like everything's different, but you're not sure why. It's not that you've ditched those prior identities, but you've transcended and included the positive aspects. And ideally, you're also doing the emotional work so that you can eradicate any of the shadow or negative aspects of those former versions of yourself.
Well,
To avoid the spiritual bypass.
but just to that,
That's why Ken, I'd say sorry about that. Ken said like he added something to his wake up, grow up, show up kind
Clean
of
up.
terminology. It's like after waking up, now we got to work on the growing up, and that's the stage development. And then you would show up as a fully integrated human being. And then he said, no, it's actually opening up. This is what we added, and I think they're using. You open up because you can wake up and all be in your head, but you have to open up the heart and open up to your intuition and that inner. But then there's also cleaning up. So just a few years ago, he started talking about cleaning up. So yeah, it's not enough to just do the mental work and the spiritual development work. You also have to do the emotional work in order to be whole. So you don't drag those kettlebells of regret and judgment along.
And it took me years to sort of recognize that when I'd spent all this time in my training, and then I'd spend this, time in the mountain in the cabin, and then I had this message, get out, go do your thing. I didn't realize until I was probably in my 40s that I was spiritually so tuned in, but I was kind of an emotional moron, and that
Right.
my inner wisdom and my inner compass was orienting me towards growing up, right? And
Mm-hmm. That's pretty common,
it is. But if I may, there was something you said about sort of eradicating the shadow or something to that effect. I think you said my experience is really more about integrating than eradicating. I have not been successful in sort of
I like that.
like excising something, cutting it out, ditching it. I've been successful at being able to sort of come to be reintegrated, right? Because the shadow element are those aspects of us that are shunned, pushed away, unacceptable for whatever reasons. And so to be able to, and this is like, right, the high state of the Zen practice, right, is the all one, the yata bhuta, as it is, right, all is included. And so
That's
this
right.
capacity to integrate those shadow pieces and then, be gentle with self,
Sure. I love that too. But I do think that there is a practice that can eradicate ultimately. And that is forgiveness. And so forgiveness is, just like the light dispels darkness, right? Shadow, the reason it's called shadow is because it's suppressed or negative energy that, that the undeveloped child doesn't have the capacity to deal with. So it creates these neurotic patterns that make it safe, that then as an adult, those patterns are still playing out. So yes, it's important. I agree with 100%, Eric. It's important to be kind to yourself and to begin to integrate those. But through awareness, by bringing awareness to them through therapeutic processes and forgiveness, then it's like turning the light on and dispelling that darkness, because it's all energy, right? We are just energetic systems. And so ultimately my experience is that trauma has been radically released, and there's this sense of just absolute lightness when it's gone. So I had to do that growing up in a traumatic family environment, a lot of alcohol. I mean, so maybe, when someone grows up in those environments, they have more of a sense of urgency, because like if you don't do that work, then it can cripple you for life, right?
I think
Anyways.
that's yeah.
So I think the forgiveness practice is a really powerful way to when done with real earnestness,
Yeah.
it can get rid of
Well,
some
it
of
ties back to the humility too, right? Because forgiveness requires a sense
Right.
of, being very accepting, not of the
Right.
whatever was done to you, but of yourself, of the conditions. I mean, it's a tall order spiritual practice to earnestly
That
forgive.
sure is. Yeah.
It's easy to say, oh, no big deal, I forgive you, but it's a different thing to let that charge evaporate.
It sure is. I found the Course in Miracles to be very helpful in that regard for that one practice. It's all about forgiveness.
Yeah.
Anyways, what? So we have a few more minutes, but the Four Virtues of a Leader, is that your more recent book?
The Four Virtues of the Leader was published by Sounds True actually in 2017 2017, and Leadership Breakdown came out earlier this year in 2023, and
okay, so that was the more recent.
But what I'm keen of, and this could be a whole another conversation, not in a few minutes that's left, but essentially I've boiled down kind of the path of this correcting ego-myopia. So the ego-myopia, as I have come to see it and study it and teach it, is based on these three needs that we have: the need to be right, the need to be liked, and the need to have might. And our ego is kind of wrapped up around these three needs, right? Assuming safety as a given, it's like, I need to be right and all the things that come with that. I need to be liked and all the things that are, come with that. And I need to have might. I want to have some control. So there's you talk about vertical development, right? So the sort of corollary to that, as it were, or the elements that we can switch on, I refer to as wisdom, love, and power. And it's in that.
Yeah. That's like Satchitananda,
right?
by the way.
It's not coincidence that there's three of them, and there's a lot of correlates and traditions. Yes, you're seeing right through my ploy, but yes,
it's yoga.
Okay, if you're going to call it right out like that in public, go ahead. I'm going to be real slick about it and kind of put it on the back door, But okay, but yes, it's wisdom, love, and power, right? Wisdom. Sort of the capacity to see and understand and dive below the surface and beyond the obvious. Love, this capacity to give without expectation, right? And power, the ability to show up unapologetically, and when we can sort of activate and integrate wisdom, love, and power, we're now living a conscious life, and as a leader, it's a conscious leadership experience. So that's where my work is.
That's awesome.
Now.
Right. So when you work with executives as a coach or with teams, how do you help them unlock wisdom, love, and power?
It starts with some cognitive foundations, right? So some context of what wisdom is, what isn't. We have assessments now that can show kind of where you are in those dimensions. I have, like for example, we look at what blocks wisdom. Right, so there's these things that I call the barriers to wisdom. So like anger and prejudice and denial, those are things that are not wisdom oriented. You can see they're contracting. Anger, I'm fierce and I'm very myopic. Denial, so how do you cultivate self-awareness and curiosity and mindfulness? Right, those are ways to help activate wisdom or power, and power. Oh my God, Mark, and you probably know this better than many, but we are so twisted around the axle on power in our world. It is,
for sure.
It is a pandemic awful. Of its own. The level of disempowerment, the desire for power, the fear of power, we are so wrapped around the axle. But I would say that misuse of power is rampant, right? But on a personal, so this innate power, for example, anxiousness leaks power. People pleasing leaks power. Blaming leaks power in buckets and buckets. Right? So how do we as leaders step into presence and authenticity and integrity as distinct from those other leaks of power? So that's sort of part of the entrance into it. And then we have ways of helping them integrate that into their personal practice and into their team practice and their organizational practice, so that there can be wisdom, love, and power, and all the benefits that come of it.
Yeah. How do you find people to work with you. Like we do similar work, and it seems like, I mean, generally with us, I have an individual who comes, who's a leader of an organization or a team, and they work with us for a year or two, and they're like, they experience the transformation, and they're like, I got to bring this back to my team. But whenever we've tried to actually sell this to an organization, it's
yeah,
finding it a little difficult.
Well, that's a bummer. I hate when you confirm my reality.
I was hoping you'd have a secret sauce for me.
Mark. Yeah, I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday on my team, and they were like, well, do we sort of blast it out to everyone, or do people have to self-select? I think there is a certain self-selection process, I think that, right, but, so the podcast, the book, sort of putting the message out there, and it's something that yeah. For 2 decades, I was much more concerned with just kind of doing the work. It's much more recent that I actually want to, maybe because I'm older, maybe because I'm an empty nester, maybe because it's a life change and I've arrived at a certain point, but the sort of the call to teach and engage with more people has switched on in a way that I haven't felt it in a long time. And
that's
so
awesome. Yeah.
Doing what's on me and what's on you to sort of invite folks into the conversation. And then if I'm coaching a CEO, to your point, before long, they're like, okay, the realization for them is that even as I'm the CEO, people have a misconception about CEO's power, by the way, because to be the CEO puts you in a role of dependent like never before, because anything that you're going to accomplish for which you're accountable and about which you're excited has to be with and through other people. So the level of dependence becomes remarkable, even though people think, oh, the CEO has all the power. Yes, and so they recognize that they want to bring this to the team so that they can create a better vessel to bring forward what they're, conceiving and responsible for. So that's, it's a fun way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know about mass market,
that's
though, if that's your question.
Yeah. I don't think so. Like we tried to, I have a professor who's also in Amazon security, he runs all their physical security, and he's like, hey, we got to bring you guys in to do some training with my team. So we put together our standard proposal, and his team just wouldn't. His team was too risk averse. Like, oh, we're not going to go work out in front of each other. I was like, are you serious? That's really sad. You know what I mean? That they wouldn't put themselves out there like that. And these people are running, part of one of the largest organizations in the world. So on the other hand, like we've got a proposal into Shell. Now, Shell Oil is a very different type of company than Amazon. And they're very risk aware, kind of like the SEAL teams. They're working on top of, these 5 megaton bombs every day in the oil fields, So they're really all over it. So, but I agree with you. It's not, I don't think, not yet, but within 5 to 10 years, I think the type of work that you and I are doing will become more common. And of course, McKinsey and Accenture will co-opt it and be doing most of the work.
Damn straight. Well, I'll tell you why I think you're spot on is because the conditions on the ground, not only have they become more complex, but we are living in a form of kind of social reality that's materially different, which is to say, the shapers of human society are executives of corporations. It's not the government so much, it's not the church. I mean, look at Zuckerberg and as examples, right? And so the mantle of responsibility is on the shoulders of executives. And while some of them don't want it, it is simply a fact. And so the MBA is going to be insufficient for the level of social, physical, moral responsibility. And so kicking up the consciousness is requisite. That's why I think it's inevitable.
I totally agree. The corporations have become the dominant institutions, and you see the devastation environmentally that unconscious leadership has created, and so it's on corporations to clean that mess up. Right? It's not going to happen by any kind of green movement or the UN or Greta Thunberg. It's going to be through the evolution of consciousness and these organizations and new organizations cleaning up and evolving. So my kind of parting shot when I close out my podcast is we need to be the change we want to see in the world, but let's do it at scale because we can do that now with technology, thanks to Zuckerberg and Musk, right? And podcasts like this. So anyways, man, this has been a great conversation, Eric. What's next for you? Like, are you working on another book? Are you going to focus on growing your business?
No, I'm going to
both?
pause on the book for a moment. I mean, this was, it's the
It's a lot
third
of
book. I
work.
mean, I have a friend of mine who just published his 45th book. I'm like, oh my God, Doug, you're an
Holy
angel
smoly.
or a God or something. I'm on my third. But no, to your point, it's about scale, right? I want to reach more teams, more executives. I want to show them how a Capricorn, who's practical, tactical, earthy, can connect to. I describe my work as an unrelenting commitment to results with an unyielding regard for spirit.
Nice.
And that blend, I want to have that. Must be our call to quit. But
I think so. Hang on. I want you to say we just said over again.
It's
when Starlight's not. Okay, we're safe.
I describe the work as a place where an unrelenting commitment to results combines with an unyielding regard for spirit.
I love it.
And that's what I'm about. That's what my life has been about. That's what I want the conversations, the actions, and the results to be.
Oh yeah, to that. And where can listeners learn more about your work and connect with you?
Sagatica.com, Sagatica, Sagatica. This comes from the Latin word sagacitas, like wisdom, sagacious or sage.
Like sagacious?
Yeah, so Sagatica.com is my website. Eric Kaufmann on LinkedIn would be the two great places. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you for your work and for bringing this to the world. I think it's really important and timely, and I appreciate your time today. It's been an awesome conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Same here, Mark. I really appreciate who you are and what you're being to the world.
Appreciate that. Yeah.